Once again, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Kevin. I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books. And before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events and in-store events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel. Tonight, we're excited to host Rebecca Walker in conversation with Sonya Renee Taylor, Jen Hofer, and Nina Revoyr. Women Talk Money is a groundbreaking collection that lifts the veil on what women talk about when they talk about money. It unflinchingly recounts the power of money to impact health, define relationships, and shape identity. Edited by prominent feminist and writer Rebecca Walker, Women Talk Money includes previously unpublished essays by trailblazing writers, activists, and entrepreneurs. In this provocative anthology, we discover a family that worships money even as it tears them apart. We read about the financial death sentence a transgender woman must confront to live as herself. We trace the journey of a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who finally makes enough money to discover her spiritual impoverishment. And we follow a stressful email exchange between an unsympathetic university financial officer and a desperate family who can't afford to pay for their daughter's tuition. Timely, resonant, and deeply familiar, Women Talk Money is a revelation and a clarion call to conduct honest conversations that demystify and transform the role money plays in our lives. Walker will be joined in conversation by Sonya Renee Taylor, best-selling author of The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love, poet and translator Jen Hofer, author and translator of numerous books, and Nina Revoyr, author most recently of A Student of History. This evening's event also includes an audience Q&A. Please use the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. And if someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, you can even upvote that particular question. And most importantly, please support Rebecca and Powell's by purchasing copies of Women Talk Money from us. A link to buy that book, as well as the link to buy the other guest books, will be shared in the chat a couple of times this evening. Rebecca, Sonya, Jen, Nina, we're so excited to have you all with us tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. And that was a lovely introduction. I'm thrilled for this event. It's great to be working with Powell's yet again. I think I had one of my very first readings at Powell's something like 25 years ago. So it's important to remember the vital role that community bookstores play, not just in the lives of the community, but in the lives of all of us writers who are out here, you know, working so hard to bring you our thoughts and insights and support you in telling your own stories. So I want to thank Powell's for decades of support. And I want to welcome you to this gathering. This is Pub Day for Women Talk Money. This is our very first event. I'm joined by three of the most amazing contributors, Nina Revoyr, Sonya Renee Taylor, Jen Hofer, who are going to move you today with some of their stories about money and how it has intersected in their lives. They're going to read a little bit from their pieces, and we're going to have a nice kind of Q&A conversation about what they write about in the work. This book has been a long time in the making. I started to think about editing this collection during the Great Recession of 2008, when so many of us were really, for the first time, you know, for a lot of people in my cohort, for the first time, freaking out about money, you know, so no one had any. It felt like everyone was trying to figure out, you know, what are we going to do? This was the beginning of the gig economy, the side hustle, the, oh my God, you know, everyone was feeling it in one way or another. And I remember, you know, on Facebook chats when we were celebrating Obama's inauguration, and saying to ourselves, of course, they brought the brother in to like fix all this mess that they've created in the collapse of the economy and, centuries of unbridled greed and exploitation. But anyway, that's another story. So anyway, so after, starting to have conversations that were much more honest about money with my friends, because so many of us were thinking about it, I felt this incredible opening. I felt an incredible connection with the women that I was talking to. And I realized that we had all been holding these secrets about money: shame if we didn't have enough, guilt if we had too much, confusion about the lessons that we had learned from our parents, insecurity about whether or not we were spending our money wisely, whether we were, saving enough, whether we understood how the markets worked, whether we, just endless questions, everything from everything I've just mentioned to then the very immediate issues of needing money to pay for healthcare, needing money to pay our rent, needing money to figure out how we were going to feed our children, needing money to figure out how to take care of our parents who were struggling. And the process of talking about these things brought us all closer together and created a space, I think, that was fundamentally radical in that, just like early, feminist consciousness raising sessions, when you start to talk about your truth, you begin to feel more in community with the people you're speaking to, and you begin to understand that together, united as a force, you can utilize your collectivity for change, for social change, for political change, for radical change, whether that's personal, political, global. And so my dream was to create this collection that would continue that conversation and to invite all of you to start to excavate your own narratives that you're holding in your body, in your psyche, in your soul about money and how it affects you, so that we could all start to be more transparent and less fearful and more committed to naming and claiming and rewriting our own money stories. So that's why the book is here. And that's why I've been able to somehow miraculously convince these gorgeous, brilliant women to contribute. So I think the best way for us to proceed is to hear from them. And I'd love to start with a piece from Nina Revoyr, The Price of Air. And Nina is an incredible writer. I've known her a very long time, and I'm really happy that she brought this incredibly moving story to the book. So welcome, Nina.
Rebecca, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you for the invitation to participate in this important anthology. It's great. I haven't even heard the backstory, so it was really great to hear the context for this. Thank you for that. And yes, haven't seen you. We've known each other a long time. Haven't seen you since the before times, but it's great to see your face. Everyone at Powell's, thank you for hosting us. It's really an honor to be part of the very first event. I don't think I had quite registered that, so that is terrific. Honored to be here also with my fellow authors here, and also just want to thank everyone that's participating from all around the country. We saw East Coast, Midwest, West Coast. There's so many things you could be doing with your time, and just really, really appreciate that you are here with us. So I'm going to read just the beginning of my essay, and I think that the context will be self-explanatory, and we can go from there. The Price of Air. It started in March of 2017. When I had an asthma attack so severe that my wife rushed me down from a remote mountain cabin to the closest emergency room, where for several hours, neither of us thought I'd make it through the night. Or it started a few weeks before that, when I came in from exercising on our deck, where dust and chemicals floated over from the construction site next door, and I began to cough up blood. Actually, it started in December 2016, when a fellow passenger's fragrant lotion triggered an asthma attack on a plane. Or maybe it started earlier that year, when I began a new job and walked past 3 massive construction sites between the parking structure and our office in downtown LA. Or maybe the summer before that, in 2015, when construction began on 5 properties next door to our house. Or in the summer of 2014, when I was diagnosed with adult onset asthma. Or maybe it was the previous October, when a mysterious illness, typhus, Lyme disease, sent me into a 9-day fever and left me, when it passed, with shortness of breath. Or in the spring of 2011, when the nonprofit I work for moved into its new headquarters, a block from the 101 freeway. It's also possible it really started years before that, in 1999, when I moved to Glassell Park, my beloved neighborhood of rugged hills and mountain views, of hawks and owls and coyotes, but also an area bounded by 4 busy freeways and a railroad line to the south. Or maybe it really started when my dad and I first moved to LA way back in 1978. The truth is, I'll never know exactly when it started. I just know that it got worse and then critical. This is a story of illness, but it's also a story of money. It's a story of how closely one is linked to the other, how those lucky enough to be financially secure might find a path back to relative wellness, while others continue to wander without a map. On Friday, June 2nd, 2017, 3 months after the asthma attack in the mountains, I left my house in Glassell Park and never went back there to live. Earlier that week, on Memorial Day, we had ended up in urgent care again. The next day, I'd flown up to Seattle for work. In the previous few months, Seattle had been an escape, a place where the dramatically cleaner air and abundance of green gave my respiratory system a break. But on this particular trip, I was already so sick that Seattle didn't help. Then Thursday evening, I flew back into Burbank, descending through a visible layer of brown smog. For years, like so many LA residents, I hadn't really noticed the dirty air. I'd come to think of it as normal. But that day, landing in Burbank, I was struck by the contrast between the pristine air I just left and the pollution to which I'd now returned. I couldn't catch my breath between the airport and the house, and as soon as I got home, it was worse. In the morning, exhausted after a sleepless night and too sick to go into the office, I arranged for a colleague to meet me at a coffee shop in my neighborhood. I'd left a message from my pulmonologist, Dr. Robert Wolf, on the way down the hill. He'd been watching my condition worsen with growing alarm over the last several months, had adjusted my medications and introduced new ones, and had put me on several rounds of prednisone. He had also encouraged me to move out of our neighborhood of unhealthful air and get closer to the beach where it was cleaner. When he called me back at the coffee shop, he was silent for a moment as I told him I couldn't breathe at my house. Then he said, "You have to get out of there. You have to get out of there now." I was a week short of 48 when this happened. I'd always been healthy. A basketball player in high school and part of college, I'd stayed fit in the years since, working out and lifting weights regularly. In my 30s, I fell in love with the Sierras, and so I started hiking seriously, graduating to backpacking at high elevation and to the occasional mountain climb. I summited Mount Whitney and Mount Shasta in my 40s and came close on Mount Rainier. My hardest mountain adventure had come after my asthma diagnosis, which until late 2016 had been so mild that it hadn't slowed me down. I was confident to the point of cocky about my health. A friend who'd had serious health problems once warned, "You have too much faith in your body." So confident was I that the novel I published in 2015, Lost Canyon, was, among other things, a celebration of physical strength and resilience in the face of adversity. I even chose an epigraph that underscored that idea from Deliverance. "The body is the one thing you can't fake. It's just got to be there." Suddenly, dramatically, my body wasn't there. Its most fundamental action, breathing, seemed impossible.
Great, thank you. So that piece goes on to talk about Nina's evacuation, basically, how she had to leave her home and ended up living, in backyards, in tents, until she was finally able to live closer to the ocean. But the entire process really revealed to her the intersection of women and environmental racism and the ways in which her community had been polluted and destroyed in so many ways, you know, for decades, and that her body was feeling that, and also a recognition that, you know, it was only because she had saved her money, she had done various things with money that allowed her to actually leave her home and save her life. And so it's a really personal journey that touches on so many important things, right? So it's the personal, it's the political, it's the socioeconomic, it's the environmental, and it's very moving. So thank you, Nina. Does anyone want to ask anything about that before we go on? Or should we come back to it? All right, we'll go on. All right, we'll come back. So Sonya, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Nina, for that reading. And thank you all so much for having me here. My essay in the book is called Having Plenty, and I'm going to jump in. I guess the only backstory you should know is that I'm 10 years old and my mother has given me $100 bill to go grocery shopping with. I mean, to go Christmas shopping with. That's what you should know. Our small Northern California suburb of Alameda seemed to hide a Christmas secret tucked in a pocket of sunshine and clear skies. I didn't even wear a jacket as I walked to the Toys R Us on the naval base, crossing the railroad tracks, walking along empty lots closed off with chain link fences. Arriving on the base, I eyed a small ice cream shop sandwiched between the Navy Exchange, a Walmart-style military department store, and the toy store. A double scoop of delicious creamy goodness seemed appropriate remuneration for my high level of grown-upping for which I had been tasked. I entered the store, my forehead barely clearing the height of the freezer case, and ordered a double scoop of cookies and cream on a sugar cone. The act seemed simple enough. It was mature of me to order and pay for my own ice cream, but not nearly as adult as Christmas shopping. The detour should have been inconsequential. 30 years later, the face behind the counter remains a blur, their gender and age swallowed by the mouth of time. But I remember their voice, shrill and adult, not like I was pretending to be, but an actual grown-up. The adult called out the price I owed, $2.50, and I beamed at them, prideful and rich, my pocket full of plenty. I reached in my blue jeans and handed over the quadruple folded $100 bill my mother had given me less than an hour earlier. Incredulously, they unfolded the flat green face of Benjamin Franklin and held it up to the light. Again, I do not recall the person's face, but the voice is permanently etched. A bark, a demand, an accusation. Where did you get this? The secrets that filled our house had followed me to the ice cream shop. They were plain to see. I was wearing them. I wasn't supposed to have that money. I was not supposed to be buying the Christmas gifts that barely 2 years earlier, I still believed Santa delivered with Rudolph. When my mother handed me all of the world's wealth, all our family's plenty, I knew it was wrong, that by having that money, I was telling the world our secret. I knew that my mother was supposed to be Christmas shopping, that she was supposed to be the adult I could only pretend to be, but she could not be that person, because whatever she did in that locked bedroom with her friends while my brother and I ate fast food on the floor in front of the television, that thing that made her stop filling the fridge with food, stop doing the laundry, stop sending us to school, stop making me and my brother dinner each night. Whatever she did in the bedroom stole everything: television sets, bill money, and school clothes. Whatever she did in the bedroom took it all, except the single piece of plenty she had given me that I had just given to the nameless, faceless, shrill adult voice who knew I should not have it, that my having it meant something was not as it should be. Where is your mother? The voice from behind the ice cream counter followed up immediately. Without hesitation and with great earnestness, I lied. She's outside. The adult's suspicion filled the shop. Their glare seemed to multiply. Their one set of eyes became 50 set of eyes, all peering down on me from a single face, each eye aware that I should not have had the plenty that was in my pocket. The adult passed me $97.50 in change and a double scoop of cookies and cream on a sugar cone. On the way out, the voice said, "Next time, tell your mother to come in here with you." I wore the stain of my ice cream shopping counter into the toy store that day and into check cashing joints and finance companies 20 years later. That Christmas, I became a martyr. I denied myself. Then, maybe, just maybe, my mother would unlock the bedroom and take care of us. When I got home, I gave my mother the change from the $100 bill. I was old enough to know it was unlikely to be spent on groceries or more presents. I was young enough to still hope that it would be. But my father would not return from overseas for 3 more months. And whether the ice cream shopkeeper knew it or not, there was only one grown-up left in our house, and it was me.
Beautiful. I think that one of the things that I love about your piece, Sonya, is it really connects with a few different pieces by Black women writers that obviously as a Black woman I deeply relate to as well, which is this common theme that we are not supposed to have money as Black women. That if we have Black money, that if we have money, that we've stolen it, that we've somehow gotten it in a very inappropriate way, and that we should constantly be sort of questioned and interrogated and made to feel as if we've done something wrong just by having it. You know, your piece is really connected to Latham Thomas's piece. Latham's not here with us, but she wrote a beautiful piece about how her mother, when she was a little girl, a real estate agent, went into a bank in Oakland to cash her commission check. And because the check was so large, the teller called the police, and the police came and handcuffed her mother and took her to the precinct because they thought that she had stolen this money that she had earned. And this is a story that is so common in our community that that is so necessary for us to talk about more and more. I know that in my own experience, and I still have this to this day, whenever I shop, whenever I'm in the world shopping, I am always aware that white people, or I believe that they are, thinking that I cannot afford something. And this is something that we all have all the time, that I cannot afford it, that I should not be able to buy, you know. And I have often overspent just to prove to those people that I can buy it. So I can look back at credit card debt from many, many years ago and connect it to this particular wound of being questioned and of being underestimated and of being, you know, sort of just looked down upon dismissively, and for me to be like, no, you know, my being, I can buy this, and have that be a kind of stand-in for a real sense of power in that moment, which we know is so fleeting. So I really love the way that you really excavate that particular moment, in addition to the complexity of the work that you then did with your organization and with your sort of self-claiming of your body and of your right to have plenty and to own it, and to not feel that you have to sort of distance it, you know, push it away, but that you deserve it. And I love the end where your friends buy you the ice cream because we do have to learn how to accept the gift, you know, gifts from others, and to know that that's okay too. That's a part of it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Jen, Jen, you've added Eliana to your name. I'm just going to stick with Hofer. Hofer, take it away. Now, this is another gorgeous piece. Go. Okay. Beautiful.
So thank you so much, Rebecca, for inviting me to be part of this book community and on this panel. And before we started, we all said we didn't care what order we read in, and it didn't really land for me how challenging it was going to be to read after Nina and Sonya. So thank you both for your beautiful words. I'm starting partway through. And my essay is called Stay. In 2016, oh, actually, I should just give you one bit of context. Right in the paragraph before this paragraph, my sweetheart and I had become resource parents, which is bureaucracy speak for foster parents. In 2016, we welcomed tiny newborn P into our home and hearts. We didn't know which was rounder, his gorgeous snoozing face, the tightly coiled black curls that grew in about a week after we brought him home, or his forever surprised looking eyes that blossomed with curiosity as soon as he could focus. We still have the clear glass bottles from the Jarritos Mineragua we bought at a quesadilla stand in South Central on our way to the hospital to meet him. Memories held by objects, held by houses, held by the memory-laden land that cradles them and us. An artist friend and her family were staying in the Airstream trailer in the backyard that summer. Her 3-year-old son, dreadlocks haloed around his dazzling smile, danced circles around us holding P for the very first time at the house, then ran out the door shouting for 9-day-old P to follow him. Come on, let's run. At P's first court date 3 months later, with no advance warning and no sense whatsoever of what it might entail for P, a judge ordered reunification for P and his birth father the following morning. We walked to the river to watch the sunset with P wrapped in my green striped rebozo, spent one last night with him, and have not seen him since. My practice of resource sharing stems from my thinking about and within privilege, and from a desire to deconstruct unjust systems and build a wildly different constellation for sustainable coexistence. I've thought a lot about reparations as one model for that unbuilding, and wonder how fostering might land within that model. To give without expecting anything in return other than the flourishing of those who have not historically been offered the opportunity to flourish, or who have flourished despite society's every roadblock to the contrary. There are certainly contexts where acting in solidarity means I step up by stepping back, removing myself from a position of leadership or spotlight. I do my best to do so when it's called for. In a reality where there are more kids in the foster system than families willing to foster, and where there are more Black kids in the system than Black foster families, I am well aware of all the ways, categorically speaking, that we as white people are less than ideal caregivers for kids of African descent like the ones we've nurtured. I am thinking about models of solidarity that involve stepping in and staying in, no matter the cost. And what does it cost us to stay? To offer solidarity, real, concrete, material solidarity, to share resources and dismantle systems of privilege decision by decision, micro and macro. What do I have? What do I need? What can I offer? Don't climb the ladder, burn it down, say Uhuru Moore and Jasmine Nayende from Fuck You, Pay Us, an amazing band, by the way. P's mom never trusted us. To her, we represented the system that had taken her child away and nothing more. One of my greatest fears about becoming a foster parent was that we would not be able to build a relationship with the birth family of a child we welcomed, that the very fact of our being willing to receive a child who was being removed from their birth family would irrevocably position us as part of the system and nothing more. And perhaps in the end, we are irrevocably part of the system. Perhaps to a mom like P's who felt her child had been stolen from her, my desire to be seen beyond my role in that theft was not only impossible to fulfill, but also irrelevant. But being a foster parent does not by any means imply that I believe in the systems that land so many kids, and especially so many kids of color, in the foster system to begin with. In fact, part of the reason I'm a foster parent is precisely because I want to approach the task of fostering, of loving and nurturing the child of a parent who is experiencing challenges that erode their capacity to do that labor, as part of the work of racial justice, as part of the work of living a life grounded in solidarity and the redistribution of wealth and resources. My sweetheart and I went into this form of family making with as much critical consciousness as possible, in a context of wild unpredictability and multiplying uncertainties, with the intention of intervening in the lives of the families with which we'd intersect through this process, with as much empathy, love, and political awareness as possible. We were hoping to make a family, yes, but our definition of family does not include rooting for anyone else's failure to thrive, and does not include parenting at the expense of anyone else's well-being. And that approach carries risk. It costs us. It costs us in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with money. And that cost, that priceless, immeasurable cost, is the heart of what we are willing to give, and is the heart, that priceless, immeasurable heart, of what these experiences and relationships give to us.
Yes, Hofer. Thank you for that. Now, I have to say, there are a lot of things to say about that piece. So for those of you who are listening and thinking about all this, that piece, this is really funny, and I'm just going to talk about our business. But Hofer's piece was one of the most challenging pieces in the book because of her, what are we using for your pronoun these days?
It's all right. It's
all
correct.
good. Great. Because of her, what some of my editors called her highly academic language and approach. And I would push back and say, but it's a kind of specificity and consciousness that she's bringing to the language that is very, very important, because she's unpacking privilege, and she's unpacking all the dynamics of the foster care system and what it means to be a white person with privileges and get blah, 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 blah. And there was just a lot of swirling around this piece. And it's interesting that the choice that you made, that what you read, is not really the heart of the piece. The piece is really about Jen's taking in and falling in love with a child, and raising a child for a serious, amount of time, and then and being promised a continuing relationship with this child, by the mother of the child, by the court system. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that particular point, and then having to losing the child, right? And so, and the tremendous heartbreak that she felt, that she wanted to honor what the mother wanted, but she thought that they were going to be able to raise this child together, and had become incredibly attached and devoted to this child. And the importance of this piece is that she then looks at what kind of expectation she should be able to have as a white woman with privilege who is involved in this kind of relationship. And that partly what we need to be able to do as people of privilege who are engaged in this kind of reparative, restorative, remunerative relationship is feel the pain of that loss, because it is not all about what she is going to get from fostering and caring for this child. It's about giving and giving and giving, even when that means loss. And to me, that's a very important contribution to this conversation, right? Because it's an understanding that people with privilege, it's not about getting an award for doing the right thing. It's not about, getting, it's about being able to give what you have, and just know in your mind, in your truth, that you've done the right thing, no matter what happens to you, and I really, that's what drew me to Jen's story and to the piece, and it's really there. But it's the part that you read is not, and this is what people kept saying. They were like, but where's it? But I can't get to the story, but it's there. And I think you write it in this very skillful way. It just takes more time for the reader to unpack. And I really fought for that piece because I think that the texture of the book as a whole is very important. You know, a collection should not all be, you know, pieces that are the same kind of writing, the same tone, same, you know, so there are pieces like Jen's, there's pieces like Nina's, there's pieces like Sonia's. Then we have an email exchange between a woman and the financial aid office as she's fighting for financial aid with these incredibly brusque officers who don't care about whether or not her child finishes college. You know, then there's a sort of pseudo magazine piece, like, you know, how to be a single mom in 10 easy steps, you know, where this writer is really going through the stages of figuring out how to pay for her school and figuring out how to be a mom on her own financially. And it's a different style, you know. So as an editor, you know, I'm compelled, I'm interested in creating a work that is not just looking at many themes and topics, but is speaking in many tongues and is exploring and innovating in different genres and forms. So Jen, I'm so glad that you brought yours, and I'm glad that we made it through those 20 edits.
Well,
You did
thanks
a
for
great
fighting
job.
for it. The thing you didn't add, which I didn't reflect in the reading, is that I anchor the different pieces of my essay with little excerpts of poetry. Even worse. What could be worse than having a complicated essay with complicated ideas with poetry running through it? Eek.
You're just a complicated person. Hey, we're all complicated in our different ways, you know, and it comes out in different ways. And you know, it's beautiful. And I hope that readers really connect with that. And I think that's another gift of a collection, is that, you know, you all out there reading, some of the pieces will really speak to you, some may not. And maybe all of them will. But the main point is that you are able to take some of them in and use them to as templates to start to think about how money is working in your own lives, to kind of get a handle on at least one thread of your story of money, you know, so it's not just this kind of incoherent, unspoken reality, you know. So we're moving towards a kind of ending. Oh, no, we're not. Okay, good, perfect. So I'd like to take some, thank you so much, everyone in the notes. I'd like to take some questions. If anyone has any, write them in the Q&A. But in the meantime, do any of you want to ask each other questions? Because this is the first time you've heard each other reading. Do you have thoughts on each other's pieces?
I have a question, actually, because something I've contemplated. What was the most surprising or difficult thing for you in writing this piece, in writing your piece?
Who, Jen?
Both of you, both Sonya and Jen.
Oh,
yeah.
Sonya and Jen, good, good.
Okay, I'll go. I mean, I think going back to that memory, I realized that it was not a memory that was prescient in my mind. And then when this prompt came for the, you know, and the invitation to write about money, I was like, oh, that's sitting there at the root of of a lot of other stuff, is this memory that I had, you know, sort of just forgotten about, in some ways buried. And so sort of surfacing that again, and then having to work through, you know, all of the feelings that lived inside of that, but also you know, reflecting. And at this point, I want to say this is about, we're 2-3 years since I submitted the piece. So even looking now from where I was when I submitted this piece to, you know, where I am now, it's just been a massive journey. And so to be reminded that those little, you know, formidable moments in our small lives really are entwined in the fullness of our existence, is really intense.
Can I interject a little bit? So, because I'm a memoirist and I deeply believe in the cathartic experience of writing our stories and how transformative that process is. And what you just said, I wonder, do you feel that writing this piece accelerated or helped to push you to a different, or helped you to evolve in a different way moving forward? And could you talk about that a little?
Absolutely. So I would say that I started much like I share in the story, there were some key moments in my professional career where I really had to confront my money stuff.
Yeah.
And I would say that I started doing that sort of most intensely around 2013. But then when writing this story, I feel like it unlocked a new level. It was like, okay, so you did, you did the basics, like you raised your little $80,000. Good. We actually raised 43, but you did it. But what does it really mean to be willing to have plenty, Sonya? What does that really mean? And are you really willing to? Or is there a part of you that still has a cap on that? Is there still a limit to what you are allowing, do you believe you deserve to receive from the universe, that you will allow to come toward you? And I had to grapple with that afterwards. It was like, oh yeah, like I could cap myself here. I could say this is it, and it's not allowed to be more than this. What would happen if I took that ceiling off? And so I feel like this essay has been an entry point into a willingness to allow whatever expansive abundance desires to come my way, to come my way. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, I really believe that we, as memoirists, and we're going to go to you, Jen, to answer that question. But I think as memoirists, when I teach memoir, I really believe that we are writing ourselves, the self that we want, into existence, and that when we finish that piece, we have posited the being that we think we are at the moment, but really that we aspire to be. And so, at the end of your piece, Sonya, where you're accepting and you're really owning having plenty, it's like we get there, and then the next day is knowing that you have to keep leaning into what you have put down as your truth. And so you push yourself forward into this new way of being. And that's, I'm so happy to hear that that was part of it for you. So thank you.
And I'm so happy you said that, Rebecca, because you laid the perfect groundwork for what I was going to say, which is, unlike Sonya, where the piece was sort of a catalyst for like you were sort of describing the writing of the piece pushing you to a different place in your thinking, maybe like into a new horizon, or into a new space of dreaming and visioning, sort of to take that cap off. I feel like what my experience of writing this piece, and I will answer your question, Nina, was actually of annotating for myself what I want to live up to. Because when you lose a child, and also 2 or 3 years have passed and my life is in a very different place than it was when I wrote this piece, I'm happy to say. But it's the grief of losing a child leads to some very like the level of pain makes you maybe not always be your best self. And so this piece was my I want to be responsible to the person that I was positing myself to be in this piece, and live up to that and do justice to that. So, which is sort of what you're saying, Rebecca. And for me, I don't know if anything, I can't remember your exact question, and I should have written it down because I have a pen in my hand, but I didn't. But I don't know if anything surprised me in writing the piece, but I've always wanted to write about my experience of fostering and sort of radical resource sharing in a range of different ways. I'd like to write a book about it. Someday, if I can make myself do it. But it's incredibly challenging to articulate. And so I really wanted to give myself sort of the homework assignment. You know how we sometimes always carry in ourselves the seeds of that book or that essay or that poem that you need to write, but you feel like you can't, but actually you can. And so I wanted to make myself do that. And I think maybe what surprised me was that I actually could, and that I was able to weave together sort of the piece starts with a story about my mostly wrecked house, some of which you can see behind me. And and goes through a whole bunch of different life experiences before it gets to this family making moment that I really wanted to write about. And so how those things knit together, I think, always amazes me. And I always forget again that they will do that. Every time I sit down to write, once again, I'm like, this is impossible, I can't do it. And then of course I can. Can you
Fabulous.
answer your,
Okay, we have some
we have questions in the
questions.
Q&A. I wanted to hear Nina's answer to her.
I know,
Maybe
we
we'll-
have some questions, but I want to hear, Nina, your thought. What was it like for you?
These are such thoughtful answers, and thank you for turning it back. I think that the strangest thing for me was understanding that my financial situation had changed, not only from when I was younger, but from my perception of myself. And I write about this a little bit in the piece. You know, we grew up, I did not grow up in privilege. I grew up, you know, single parent, immigrant family, English as a second language, in an area where there was quite a lot of, you know, gunfire and you know, lots of not great stuff. But like so many people, lived that story of economic mobility, went to a, you know, private fancy college and got an education. And even though I didn't choose things that were lucrative, you know, I'm a writer and I've worked in nonprofits on behalf of low-income kids and families, but I had been the right combination of smart, but much more importantly, tremendously lucky, driven by fear of my parents' financial difficulties, you know, had been very careful. And so what happened is that when I got sick, and it took a long time to get sick, as you heard, we had the wherewithal and the ability and the privilege to be able to move. And so, you know, to realize like, holy crap, had I been in the situation that I actually thought of myself in, which is struggling, we would not have been able to pay for a rental as well as the place we already lived. We would not have been able to pay the medical bills, you know, all those things. And so having to, you know, kind of realize like, you know, I'm in a different state, was a strange thing to feel. But this was only after crisis was done. And then to answer, I saw Millicent's question about how do I feel? I'll tell you, I feel a great sense of displacement because we live in this crazy ass place now, of, you know, beautiful air, but also like it's let's just say it's culturally not comfortable for us to be a queer couple of color, in all kinds of ways. So I feel displaced, and I feel a righteous anger on behalf of all the many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in my city alone who live next to oil refineries, freeways, trash burning facilities, and cannot do what I could do, which was to move to better air. Because yes, I was privileged with the doctors, medical care, et cetera. The thing that got me better was moving to better air. And the injustice of air having to be something that is available only to folks who can afford it is a massive injustice. So that's kind of how I feel. And then to suddenly realize like, hey, I'm one of those people who could do that, who could make that move for, you know, to here was kind of mind blowing. But it just makes me feel doubly committed to raising these issues about air pollution and environmental justice.
Okay, so you made me cry as usual. I have to cry at least once. Yes, thank you, Nina. So, okay, let's go to these questions, these amazing questions. Let's see. When you initially confronted your money story, what was the trigger that allowed you to see it? What is the right time for parents? What would you say? So, blah, 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 blah. That would you ever mean, Antonio? Okay, can you all see these? Does anyone want to take any of these questions? I could take this one about, I had thousands of submissions to consider. Should I take that one? Okay, anonymous attendee, I love you. This is a funny question. So this is my fifth, I think I've said, collection. For some reason, I have a weird addiction to doing these collections because I believe that they're so powerful and they create community and they're important. I never open the submission process in that way, which, you know, whatever reason, maybe to save my sanity. But for every book, and specifically for this book, I generally approach the topic and decide which things I want to make sure are addressed. So if it's Black women being, feeling as if we don't deserve to have money, it's criminalized, right? If it's environmental racism and how it affects women's bodies, if it's, the foster care system, more privilege, and how white people with privilege are engaging with the reparations movement. Whether, I generally have a very clear sense of the topics that I want to address. And then I end up finding the people that I know can handle the subject, or I am completely in love with some of their work, people's work. And so then I approach them thinking that they have something to contribute. I know that there's a story in there about money, and I just want to get it, I want to help bring it out. So it's never thousands. I would say that for this book, there are 29 essays. I probably worked with about 40 writers. I will say that of all the collections, this was one of the most difficult to do. Women had a very hard time writing about money. People really, it is one of the most difficult. I mean, and I've had people writing about toxic masculinity, and people writing about new family configurations, and people writing about rewriting feminism, and people write, but this book, hours on the phone, trying to figure this out and excavate and encourage and embolden. But it always comes down to wanting to make sure there's a diversity of perspectives, ideological, cultural, racial, socioeconomic, all of it, and then being drawn to writers that I think can really bring the topics alive, and whom I admire and want to work with, and will feel privileged to be able to work with, which is very true of this collection. I have fallen in love with all of these writers through these pieces and the work that they put into doing them. So, long answer to that question. When is the right time for a parent to address this with a child? To address what? Money? Do we have any thoughts? I mean, am I the only one with family, children? I do have children. I talk about money with my kid all the time. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
I mean, I have the thought that anything you don't talk about your kid, you must want for the world to talk to them about it. That's my general philosophy. If you are choosing not to have that conversation, then you must be abdicating that conversation to the larger world, and whatever message it is the larger world desires to give. And so I think it's never too early to begin to start framing. As soon as, like, kids know, you go to the grocery store, do they ask for something, you're like, I don't have the money. It's a conversation, right? Like, so there are always opportunities and spaces to begin the conversation. But for me, I think one of the most important pieces of that conversation as a child, telling the story about me as a kid, is like the more giving a context for the conversation, so that whatever the money issue is, I don't in my child mind think it's my fault. I don't in my child mind think it's something I've done wrong or done right, or whatever that case may be. So I think the more transparent and honest, but also making sure that kids know that, like, whatever is happening with your money stuff, it isn't their fault. They may be impacted by it, but it isn't their fault. I think that framing is really important.
And it also seems so linked to talking to kids about structures of power imbalance and injustice. I mean, how can you possibly talk to anyone about money without talking about structures of oppression and inequality and lack of inclusivity? So, I mean, if you're going to be talking to your children at all, you need to be talking to them about that. In addition to, I also live with young people who go to the public schools, and definitely whatever we don't talk about at home is getting talked about in ways that I might not agree with.
Yes, and I would say that I have been very transparent with my son about money, and I don't know that everyone agrees with my approach. I mean, but I think it's very important that he understands some basic, I mean, the other day we were talking about Clarence Avant, the Black Godfather. I don't know if any of you know of him. You should see the documentary about him on Netflix. Anyway, his maxim is find out what the white man makes and then add some to that when you tell people what to pay you, you know, and you know, so again, that's back to you, Hofer, is talking about systems of inequality. And I think when we're talking to our kids who have to engage those systems, we have to both be explaining how they work and how they operate and providing the antidote for it, you know. So for me, it's been important for him to understand economics, both local, global. It's important for me that he understands the stock market. It's important for me that he understands investing, saving, that he understands the importance of how wealth is generated, that he also understands the importance of multi-generational wealth, especially in Black families. You know, there's a way in which, you know, we do not talk enough about how important it is to save money for the next generation so that it keeps going. We can lose it all in one generation. We can make it, lose it, overdone, back, you know. So I think it would be irresponsible for me not to have these conversations with him, in addition to the basic conversations about managing money and making money and thinking about your career and, you know, all of those things that are considered more pragmatic. But, you know, and I've always talked to him about it, you know, from the time he was very young. As soon as he understood, you know, we've had the piggy bank. I mean, you know, so I don't think I think it's a part of being a parent. You know, it's like, I won't let my kid, you know, graduate from high school and leave my house without knowing how to drive, without, you know, knowing how to invest and save money, you know, without knowing how to take care of his skin and hair, without, you know, you know, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think it's critically important to talk about these things with kids.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's funny. I think, Rebecca, I think you're a super parent. Just to be able to have those conversations. You know, my experience of money, and we don't have kids, but certainly my experience with both sets of parents, you know, father and then mother and stepfather, was that it was both something that you don't talk about necessarily, but also something that no one helps you with.
Yeah.
And so the received lessons, which I actually think was a really good lesson for me, that no one is going to help you, was, you know, there's no safety net. And even and particularly them, they were not a safety net. You know, that was one of my received lessons, which, you know, was a tough one, but ultimately, you know, probably not a bad one. You're light years ahead. I don't, you know, I'm in the interesting position of having to deal with my mother's Japanese. She remarried, my father's white American, my mother's Japanese, from Japan, remarried a Japanese man. And I'm now helping them,
Right.
you know, elderly, you know, figure out money stuff. They think the stock market is voodoo, which, you know, well, and it is a really interesting thing, you know, the reversing, trying to talk to your parents about money as well.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think our generation, our parents are very secretive about money. I've really had to push against my, you know, push my parents to be much more transparent, you know, because they're very high stakes, you know, and I tell them, listen, not disclosing the plan is not going to help anybody to make sure that things work out in the long term. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So I don't have any fears about telling Tencent, okay, I'm going to die, could be tomorrow, and this is what you need to know, you know, and this is what we have, and this is what you know, and I think that that's one of the things I hope this book can also do, is encourage people to really be more transparent and less fearful. You know, this idea that if you talk about it, you'll lose it. If you talk about it, the kids will lose perspective and then they won't work for themselves. I mean, it's crazy. And the people who have managed to hold on to multi-generational wealth in this country, these rich, very wealthy white people, have been talking to their children about managing their money since they were born. And that's why so many of them still have it, you know? So anyway, not that we want to replicate those models, we want to tear those models down, but we can't tear those models down before Black people and people of color and all the different people who never have had that, you know, have any possibility of getting that. So anyway, it's complicated, but yes. But this is a great question. Sonya, you've spoken about operating from a place of scarcity. Can you discuss this as it pertains to money?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, in the essay, this idea of like having plenty, what happens in that story is I'm given what I think is a lot, and then immediately told I one, know that I shouldn't have it, right? Because of the context of my life. And then it's affirmed that I shouldn't have it. And then the rest of my life, I act as a repellent to money, literally. And I think that's one of the things that we forget about in this conversation of sort of scarcity and mindset and its relationship to our actual material life. There are absolutely structures and systems that impede our ability to have what we need. That is never, ever, ever imagined. That is so very real. And as people who have been indoctrinated into those systems, there are ways in which we replicate those systems in our very lives on a regular basis so that we do the work ourselves, which gives the system a break. Oh, you don't have to deprive me of money because I've learned how to deprive myself of it. You don't have to tell me I don't deserve it because you've convinced me long enough that now I tell myself I don't deserve it. And so there's just the notion that like there isn't enough, there's never going to be enough, and I'm never going to have enough. And I started to be able to see how that was a story over everything, how it was a story that wasn't just about the money in my bank account. It was a story about my relationships. It was a story about the love I had access to. It was a story about my friendships, right? It was a story about all the areas of my life. And it was obscuring my ability to see what I did have. And if you can't see what you have, you can't leverage what you have to get more. And that's what it was doing, was blocking my ability to actually call in what wanted to come to me. I needed to stop being a repellent, a repellent to that which I most desired. And that meant undoing the idea that I didn't deserve it. Yeah.
Yes, honey. I'm sure of the preach. Exactly, Melanie. Preach. Beautiful. Yes, I think that is so important. Oh, this is such a real place so many of us live from and are constantly working to address it. Tell it, Sonya. Yeah, we've been told a long time that we don't deserve, and that we shouldn't ask and we shouldn't hope and we shouldn't want. It's really, really important to change that story. Okay.
I want to say really quickly, because I write this in the essay, but I just think it's important. What I say in the essay, and I just want people to try it, that it just so happens that my healing has been directly proportional to the amount of money in my bank account. And I just want you to take it on. Just go on ahead and try it out and see how it works.
That's beautiful. Yes. And then, to take it to the next level is, what I think when you come from our experiences, so many of us have had these experiences, it's not just about, bringing the money into the bank account. It's about then what we're able to do with the money, because we now have a kind of consciousness, all three of us, all four of us here have a kind of consciousness. When we get the money, we want to do something different with the money. We don't want it to just be a sort of tool of consumerism. We want it to be a part of the transformative, radical, change that this world needs. So again, I don't know if I mentioned, but Leah Hendricks Hunt is one of the women who writes in the piece, and very, very wealthy. Did I already talk about her? But anyway, very wealthy woman who managed to use her access to millions and millions of dollars to fund movements like BLM, like Occupy Wall Street, and so on. And so this idea of what women do with money once we get it, once we feel we can have it and we're allowed to have it and we should have it, then it's not just about self-care. It's not just about family care. It's about how do we do all of that in a way that transforms our community. It's about community care. It's about global care, because we understand that it's all connected. So that is something that I thought that the book would have that resonance, that idea, but I've been really surprised at how clear each piece is by the end. Each writer comes up with a way of revisioning wealth and money and the use of money and their feelings and perspectives on money in a very powerful way. And that's, I think, been one of the great gifts of the book, is to see that when we follow these stories to the end, we actually get somewhere very radical, you know.
And some are very different. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about it's not about accumulating wealth just to accumulate it, which is how capitalism would have us accumulate it. And you might read Sonya's piece and my piece and think that they're polar opposites in a sense, but I actually think that they're companions, because the question of when I have more than what I need, my own definition of what I need. When I have excess over what I need, what can I provide? And how is it that resource sharing is also a form of self-nourishment? That is not in any way different from someone who had the ice cream shop experience that you recount having as a child, being able to move into abundance and make your own decisions about what you're going to do with that abundance. Like, those things actually aren't opposed. And I think it's only a vision of wealth as accumulative rather than wealth as collective. And sort of like, you know, a kind of a center that radiates out, or like multiple centers that need to radiate out. It's only that vision that would think that those views are opposed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'd love to hear more from Nina and Sonya about the topic, being with the difficult feelings and maybe even guilt of being able to escape when others aren't able to. I think this is a very important question. This idea of survivor's guilt. We've called it survivor's guilt, but you know, Sonya, you've already addressed some of this about deserving to have abundance, but does anybody want to speak to this question of survivor's guilt? Nina, you were talking about realizing you're in a different class now, or in a different position. Sonya, I mean, how are y'all working with that?
You know, I think my earlier rant, you know, I addressed a little bit of that. I don't necessarily feel guilty. I feel driven. I feel driven both to kind of talk about, you know, my own story is really, and you know, Rebecca, I don't write memoir like you. I've never figured out how to do it. I'm a novelist, I'm a fiction writer. So this is not my thing. And it's also not my nature to kind of talk about my issues or my challenges. You know, I like to do the sublimation into fiction. But this felt important to do because it personalized something that is often very abstract. And, you know, I mean, I know so many people, you know, I was one of the fools for whom, you know, things like asthma, things like environmental justice felt like it was someone else's problem. And this is for someone who has spent my entire adult life working on behalf of low-income kids and families. I should have known better. But it's just one of those things of like, until you experience something, you don't fully understand it. And, you know, it goes without saying that, you know, the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of folks who are most impacted by issues of pollution and exposure to, you know, toxic chemicals, et cetera, you know, low income, people of color, Black and brown and Asian communities, particularly Black and brown communities. And this is just okay. Like, it's just, you know, oh, Los Angeles has more air pollution deaths than any place else. Oh, well. And and it just, you know, as someone, you know, it's been a couple years since I took the first shot at this essay, and COVID happened in between. If you look at a map of COVID deaths in Los Angeles County, COVID deaths and serious illnesses, and overlay it with a map of air pollution in Los Angeles County, they're almost exactly the same. And of course, that is not a coincidence, because folks who have pre-existing conditions, folks also who are essential workers, you know, out on the front lines, you know, that's who's getting sick and is not doing well. So I don't feel, guilt is probably the wrong word. I am well aware of my privilege. And I also feel like in the position I'm in, having a voice as a writer, you know, working now not at a nonprofit anymore, but in a philanthropy, you know, trying to kind of raise issues related to environmental justice, that I can do something with this experience to try and make things better for others.
Yes. Sonya, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo everything that Nina said, but and also to say that like it doesn't, and I think this also relates to what you said, Jen, which is like I'm a firm believer that I give from my overflow. You can't have what's in my cup. I need that. I need what's in my cup. But when I am full and vibrant, then I have so much more to give. And so I don't have any guilt about doing anything that fills my cup. I don't, right? Because because I recognize that whatever it is that I get, I give, whatever it is that I have more of, I share more of. And so getting out of a place that felt, literally and figuratively and emotionally toxic to a place where I could have access to the full range of myself is an offering to the larger world. And so, one, it's a possibility map. What I want people to look at me is be like, oh, the fat, dark-skinned, neurodivergent girl whose mama was a crack addict figured out how to get the hell out of the United States and give herself the best life possible. Oh, that must be a thing that can happen. That's what I want people to look at me and see. And I'm always happy to show people the path I walk to get there.
Yes, honey. Good. Okay. Well, I think that we may be on our way out here. I'm getting notes that should we be closing up? Are we at our time? Because we could
Yes,
talk
we
forever.
are.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're just a little bit over time, but that's fine. It's a great talk, very important subject. This is the book, Women Talk Money. I put a link in the chat
Oh,
for the
good.
book just a little bit ago. And I'm also going to post a link in the chat for our YouTube channel. This event was recorded, so you can click on that link there. And if you know people that you want to see or to share it with, then you can post that link tomorrow after the event goes up on our YouTube page. All right, Rebecca, Jen, Nina, Sonya, so great to have you with us tonight. I hope to see you in person someday soon. And everyone at home, thanks for tuning in as well. And from everyone at Powell's, have a great night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. I love you guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.